5:01, and I'd like to call the meeting to order. I'm the Vice Chair, Arthur Marcus, in place of Jason Blank, who's not here today. With that, so we've called the meeting to order at 5:01 PM, and we're going to stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So we do have a quorum. We have six members present today. And if anyone has taken a look at the minutes, are there any comments or concerns about the minutes that anyone would like to raise? If not, do we have a motion to approve?
I move that we approve the minutes.
Speak into your mic. It's up in the air, David. David.
Dave Parker.
Thank you.
And do we have a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Barbara Lyons. Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries and the minutes are approved. So our first item is case number UDP HP 21039. The owner is Flavio Galvan at 1510 Southwest First Street. And this item is coming back from, well, go ahead, please walk up to the mic, from our last meeting, which we heard it also.
Would you like me to swear him in, Mr. Chair?
Yes, please.
Please raise your right hand. If you're going to speak to the board today, do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you.
Yes.
So perhaps you might walk us through
Could you
what
just
has
do the
changed
disclosures again?
in your presentation.
Could you do the disclosures?
Oh, I'm sorry. Do we have any disclosures from the board?
I drove by the property yesterday and took a look at it.
Nothing to disclose?
No disclosures.
Went by the property.
None.
Barbara?
I drove by.
Okay. Okay, so, please go ahead and just describe to us what has changed in the project.
Okay, the last one, do you need put the door more back and with the glass
So
clean?
you've moved the doors back from the front of the garage, I believe it's at 2 feet.
Yes,
Okay.
and then I changed now with the project. I working with Trisha, and I don't know if it is okay now.
Well, you also added the windows, the stationary windows on the
Yes.
side.
Yes,
Okay. And was that the only change from when we saw this the last time?
yes, I changed and now it's better.
Okay, great.
Mhm. Yes, I'm it's good now.
Good, good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any members of the public who would wish to speak on this item? If not, we'll close the public comment and open it up to board members. Please jump in.
I personally would like to see this gentleman get approved for his proposal. I drove by the property, I took a look at it, and I could really not see any detraction from the historic value that it has now, and this improvement is a quality of life for him. And I just, looking at the rest of the neighborhood and looking at the rest of the buildings and seeing the mix in that area, I really don't think he's asking or proposing something that's going to create any detraction to his property or any property around it. So that's my feeling on it.
Anyone else?
Well, enough said.
Well, I would jump in and I would definitely agree with you that I think you've taken our words to heart from the comments the last time. And I know this may not go far enough to satisfy all of the historic preservation requirements, but I think it's a good compromise, and I think it should be approved. With that, if there's no more board comment, Do we have a motion?
Go ahead, Jim.
I was hoping Richard would do it because he knows how to read these things.
I'm having a little trouble with the internet pulling up the resolution. As soon as I get it, I'm happy to make the motion.
I can read the resolution if you'd like, and you just say you adopt it and just what the reason for the approval is, if you'd like.
Let's do it that way, sure.
A resolution of the Historic Preservation Board of the City of Fort Lauderdale, Florida, approving a certificate of appropriateness for a major alteration to infill an existing open carport for the property located at 1510 Southwest First Street, Fort Lauderdale, Florida, in the Silver Bend Historic District, case number UDP HP 21039.
Citing that the proposed alterations meet, I don't want to say the per se guidelines, but what would be your suggestion there, Sherry, as to what we fill in?
If you want to say meet guidelines, or you could say what Tim said, which was it doesn't take away from the, the historic.
We'll fill in with what Tim had mentioned, that it doesn't detract from the historic.
Yeah, there's no detraction to the historic integrity of the building or the neighborhood.
Okay.
That works better.
I can write that in there.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you.
And that's your motion.
I still don't have it up. Share the resolution. That was the motion.
Do we have a second for the motion?
I'll second it.
Seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Congratulations. Good
No.
luck.
I
Thank you.
vote no,
Thank you so
Oh,
much.
you vote, I'm sorry, Barbara
One no.
votes no.
because it
Oh.
doesn't meet the criteria in four areas.
Understood. Thank you very much.
You're all set.
Thank you.
You're all set.
Happy New Year.
Good luck with
Yeah.
everything. And I believe that's all we have, Tricia, on the regular agenda?
That's correct.
That's correct. So there are no communications to the city commission? Nothing?
That would be up to the board.
Okay, no outstanding ones. Then we have, for the good of the city of Fort Lauderdale, the discussion of the Times Square Plaza, which is on here.
Correct.
Maybe you could give a little preface to this item before we introduce it?
Well, this item was put on the agenda at the request of the Historic Preservation Board to continue the discussion of the potential for designation as a historic district of the Times Square Shopping Center at the corner of Oakland Park and Federal Highway. So the board requested that staff send a letter to invite property owners to this meeting to have an open discussion about that possibility. So letters were sent to property owners a few weeks ago in advance of this meeting to invite them to this meeting to hold that discussion with the board.
Okay. Yes.
Mr. Chair, I had communicated to Trish and the city manager, which she has already explained what this meeting's about, but my request that they recommended I wait to ask the chair that we would give a little snapshot of what the historic board does, why we're here, and why are they here. And then my next concern or question was, what is the actual format of our discussion tonight? Is each person going to come to the podium and speak for a few minutes, or are we, how will they be recognized? How are we going to run the show?
It'll be like any other public discussion. People will come to the podium
Okay.
and speak on what they came here to speak about
Okay.
in terms of how it relates to the Times Square Center. And Tricia, please correct me if I'm incorrect here, but we brought this up for discussion because the Times Square Center is a notable architectural piece of architecture in Fort Lauderdale, designed in its entirety by the architect Charles McKirahan. And it was designed as sort of an urban village in the mid-century style. Fort Lauderdale has been looking to try and preserve and protect a lot of this mid-century architecture, which is currently not protected and can be demolished or done whatever to. And I think that was the reason for the beginnings of our discussion, and it's just purely in the discussion stage right now. There's no other motives going on. So with that, would any members of the public care to come up and speak? Sherry, do we have to make sure that everyone's sworn in?
Yes, I can swear them in, but I did want to answer Tim's question about the role of the board. In the code, it has the duties of the board. If you would like, I could read them.
Yes, please.
4732-3 ULDR. It says the powers and the duties of the Historic Preservation Board are as follows. To take action necessary and appropriate to accomplish the purpose of this board, these actions may include but not limited to continuing the survey and inventory of historic buildings and areas and archaeological sites and plan for their preservation, recommending the designation of historic districts and individual landmarks and landmark sites, regulating any alterations, demolitions, relocations, adaptive use, and new construction to designated property by issuing certificates of appropriateness, applying the United States Secretary of Interior standards for rehabilitation and guidelines for rehabilitating historic buildings as guidelines for changes to designated property, working with and advising the federal, state, and county governments and other boards and departments of the city, advising and assisting property owners and other persons and groups, including neighborhood organizations which are interested in historic preservation, initiating plans for the preservation and rehabilitation of individual historic buildings, undertaking education programs, including the preparation of publications and placing of historic markers, review National Register nominations and provide comments to the appropriate entities. And it talks about public hearings. It says the board shall have the power to conduct public hearings to consider historic preservation issues. A simple majority of the membership shall be required for decisions involving landmark sites, historic districts, and applicants shall be given written notification of the board's decisions. The board shall prepare and keep on file, available for public inspection, a written annual report of historic preservation activities, cases, decisions, qualifications of members, and other historic preservation work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sherry, can you just cite that ULDR section one more time?
It
47.
is 4732.3.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay,
Andrew, do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you.
hello.
Good evening, Chair, members of the board. Andrew Shine with Lockery and Chalkis, here representing the property owner of 2300 East Oakland Park Boulevard, 3038 North Federal Highway, as well as the Coral Corner Shopping Center Corporation. Just a background on this is, they call it the Coral Corner Shopping Center. And the common elements, including the parking lot, are owned by the corporation. And there are 18 different owners, as you know, of the properties themselves. All of those owners have a share in this corporation and can vote on certain matters that affect the common elements in the shopping center itself. As a brief background, the corporation did get together with the board of directors and voted to oppose any initiative to designate this historic. And I'm only saying that because I know that at the last meeting, one of the major sticking points was that, you want property owners to be enthusiastic and work with the board to do that, and that's not going to happen here. Just putting that out there. Tenancies have been an issue in this shopping center. The building is very old, not very old, but it's old, and that's not the market for tenants these days and what they want. Going back to the very old part, I know certain years. The board and Tricia have said that this was built in certain years. In addition to that, though, the Broward County property appraiser does have the effective year built of 1980. Effective year at the property appraiser is when certain major renovations have gone on at a property. They change the effective year built of it to start the new tax roll from that date. So the property appraiser recognizes that there were a lot of changes. If you look at historic, even Google Maps, the Google Street View going back to 2009, there have been significant changes on the facade for this property. So we do have the president, Bob Roselli, of the Coral Corner Shopping Center Corporation here. If you have any questions for him, he can speak on behalf of the corporation as president. But this might not be the properties to go forward with, as maybe the others that were discussed at the same meeting were a little more in line with, how they were originally built and not as many changes. But this one, this is not it. It's an amalgamation of 18 different properties that have changed significantly over the years. And we don't believe that just because they were designed by an architect who designed other buildings in Fort Lauderdale, some notable, some not, that would qualify this for historic designation, whether it be as a thematic district or individual properties. So we do have Bob here if you have any questions, and I'm also available for any questions.
I have some questions for you or for either one of you. I guess it would be two questions. What has changed on the building if you're saying things have significantly changed? Because obviously so many of the designs were very different from one another from the very beginning. And secondly, what are the chief concerns that the property owners have?
Of designating it historic, tenancy is a major one. Once you get historic designation, you have to, it's a lot harder to make facade changes. It's a lot harder to make even some interior changes depending on the direction the board takes. And it's more of a question of why. These owners look at this shopping center as a building, and it doesn't look that much different than other non-notable shopping centers. It's more of a question of why is the board set on doing this when there's really nothing particularly notable about this shopping center. It's not a standalone building with a cool sign, with a neat sign like a couple others that we discussed at the last meeting. It's a shopping center.
We would have to agree to disagree because historic preservation is certainly an acquired trait, and it's something that one needs to be educated about. And I think part of our mission as a board is to try and educate the general community as to what we have here. And these are notable buildings. This was one of the most famous architects of his time in the country. So I just don't want to minimize his work.
Understood, and I don't want to degrade the accomplishments of the architect, but there have been significant changes to this building over time that I could present in the future. Particularly the facade along Federal Highway is different than it was even 12 years ago.
Well, that changed in the last 5 years.
Right.
So,
Right. So they've already altered his design. So taken as a single building or a single development, it's changed too much since it was originally designed.
And just realize that, and I'm not being argumentative at all, change in itself is not a reason to deny historic preservation, because the building could be changed back just as easily. So,
Understood.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Over here.
I do. Steve Tilbrook?
Yes. Just say yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
I do. Yes. Hello. Good to see everybody. Steve Tilbrook, Ackerman Law Firm. I have a few items we're going to show you, and let me get my notes out here real quick. My address is Ackerman Law Firm, 201 East Las Olas Boulevard, Suite 1800. We're here representing Oakland Corner LLC. Oakland Corner LLC is a partnership that owns 3050 North Federal Highway. This is the property that faces Federal Highway at the significant corner of Oakland Park Boulevard and Federal Highway. It's a signature corner in Fort Lauderdale. And we support the corporation's attorney and their perspective, and we're just here independently as a unique property within this shopping center, perhaps the most visible of the properties in the shopping center, to share our experience and to particularly emphasize our opposition to any effort to create a historic district at this location that includes our client's property. If you want to, we don't support it for other properties, but we particularly will fight it for this particular property. So the property, this is an old photograph of the corner of Oakland Park Boulevard. Oh, it's not projected yet.
Wow, what's that?
We're getting there.
What were you saying? What? Were you saying something earlier?
I don't know what they're, trying to do. He's supposed to have a
Thank you.
Now it's working.
presentation.
Oh,
There you
yes.
go.
Thank you. This is just a, and I'm not going to do a full presentation, just a few items. Can you hear me?
Yes.
The items, okay, thank you. Just a few photographs and a story about expectations, about investment, and about the challenges of achieving tenants at this particular center. This is a photo from around 4 years ago, maybe 5 years ago, of the corner. This showed, and I grew up right around the corner from here, so I remember 50 years ago what it looked like at Hales, Oregon. It's been there many years, and there hadn't been many changes over the years. Our client acquired the property about 4 years ago, and it hadn't had tenants for a couple of years. And they weren't able to achieve tenants. And they weren't able to achieve tenants because of the look and the character and the upkeep of the building. There was no visibility on the second floor. There was poor visibility in the first floor. There were structural and safety considerations because of the eaves that went right over the sidewalk. The windows were out of code. The doors were out of code. There was poor lighting. And it wasn't an attractive building, and they couldn't get tenants. And frankly, they couldn't get tenants because of how the building looked, and also because of how the building functioned. It wasn't until they realized, and this is a group of partners, that they had to make significant investments and strip away the architecture, the historic architecture of this building to make it marketable in the marketplace for tenants. There's another photograph, not a great photograph, the old mattress land. This is some of the construction where they took away the brick facades. They took away all the old windows, the structural columns. They replaced the lighting, the roof, basically rebuilt the building. This is an image, not a great image. I had to print it on my home computer today of the exposed new windows, taking away all of the brick architecture that is so indicative of mid-century modern and the particular architect that you're seeking to recognize, may seek to recognize. And one additional photo of the clean, modern architecture, current architecture, I don't know if I call it modern, current architecture that has led this building to be re-tenanted and marketable and successful in the marketplace. So our client purchased this property with certain investment-backed expectations to, number one, receive a return on their investment, to have a successful commercial building. They did not buy a building to create a museum. They did not buy a building to be part of a historic district. They bought a building to get tenants and to make money and to contribute to the community. They did that. They've invested significant dollars into this building. They've rebuilt the building, recognizing it has limitations, but also bringing it up to current standards for code, things that couldn't be done with the prior architecture. And we wouldn't want to impose upon the rest of our tenants the challenges of trying to preserve a building, at the same time find tenants and meet current building codes while preserving some type of architecture that our client didn't buy the building because of the architecture. They bought the building because of the location and the visibility. And they had to substantially modify this building in order to enhance visibility and to make it achievable, marketable. So we're here to tell you that we do not support an effort to create a historic district at this location, with all due respect, having served on your board for many years. This is not the right location to create a monument to mid-century modern. This is a premier corner in Fort Lauderdale. Marketability and tenancy is the premier and number one issue for investment-backed expectations and property ownership. What we're talking about is private property and the ability to achieve a private property's owner's interest in that property and receive investment-backed expectations based upon what they invested in the property. They invested in property that was not a museum, was not historic, was not identified as being particularly significant for architecture. And for the layperson, it wasn't a significant architectural statement at that corner. Now it is a much more marketable building, but it doesn't really directly relate to the prior architect that may or may not have worked on this building. So I don't know how to make it any clearer. Our client will fight any effort to achieve a district at this location. We'll hire professionals, we'll hire architects to dispute it. We'll be meeting with our city commissioners and the mayor. The mayor came out for the grand opening, was very happy with the improvements that have been made with the facade that has been stripped away from this particular building. We had a big grand opening. You know, it'd be a shame to try to impose upon a future owner or other owners in this district a certain architectural style when that's not what they invested in. Thank you for the opportunity. Here to answer any questions.
Robert Roselli. Yes, Robert Roselli.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Bob Roselli, and I'm president of the Coral Corner Shopping Center Company, the corporation that owns the common areas. I'm also a owner of two properties. One is the Roselli Arts Building, and the other is the Penny Lane property, because this particular plaza has front properties, structures that are on Federal and on Oakland Park, as well as a row of properties behind it with just a little parking lot in between. So I own those particular properties. There are about 14 owners of different properties in there, but some owners own more than one, like myself. But as far as background concerning me, I'm an attorney. I also own Roselli Properties. I grew up here. At the same time, before I became a lawyer, since I was a little guy, I wanted to be an architect. So I had driven by this plaza forever. To me, it was always depressed. There was nothing notable architecturally about it. I understand that some of the influences to this architect might have been the Bauhaus with all the brick and the way the lights might have played off on the interior of the units. And there's a lot of, it's kind of a hodgepodge of mid-century modern architecture. I don't think it never really had a notable use. I found out just a few years ago that Smitty's occupied where Penny Lane is. But there's no notable use for historic value of this property at any time. In fact, when I bought the property and I told people I had bought it because it was very depressed, the corner was very depressed. People, I guess the most infamous uses is that a lot of these places were escort agencies and modeling agency. It was it's just a hodgepodge of tenants over the years. It's dilapidated and depressed buildings. The building that I bought, I put so much money into the building just to get it rented. Now, I did brand it. I put my name on it, and I won't put my name on a building unless I think it's worthy. So I did do some things to it to make it nicer. But at the same time, the buildings are old, they're crumbling, they have spalling in their concrete, they don't have ADA bathrooms, they don't have elevators. You can't put an elevator in there. Because now if it becomes historic, the cost of doing anything like that to meet ADA standards would be prohibitive. It just wouldn't happen. At the same time, even the storefront windows, if you're gonna change them out to impact, and if the design of the building also in the mid-century era, the design of the building was also the storefront, the way the window panes were and the size of the panes. But you can't replace the window panes, the large sheets of glass in that plaza without meeting current codes, which will never allow you to put in new impact windows of the same size and design. For example, in Penny Lane, there was sheets of plate glass that were 8 feet wide, 9 feet high. It's just, you can't do that. At the same time, as an attorney, that although I do mainly personal injury, you may know that, but I also do major property casualty cases. So I represent the condominiums on the beach that get whacked by the hurricane, that have issues with the spalling concrete, with the rebar erosion, with other issues involving the old roofs and things like that. So this property, this whole corner is not only depressed because of its, I hate to even say it's depressed, because to me, that corner could be a shining example and gateway to Fort Lauderdale Beach, but it's a depressed corner. The lighting is bad. The city really doesn't do anything with landscaping. I've added lights in front of my building, which would be against any historic designation, because the lights I put there are to keep the homeless away. So I understand that Fort Lauderdale has roots in mid-century modern architecture, but I don't think that putting that designation on this corner is the right thing to do. It'll forever limit this whole corner to a status of being depressed, of being too costly to really, for owners to make repairs. It'll reduce property values. The parking problem in that center prohibits really any use that would garner any reasonable revenue to make an investment realistic for a true investor. So the property, although it's a prime location, the architect, I'm being told, is a notable architect, but I've never heard of him. The prior uses of that corner are not notable or historic. It's a depressed corner. People are trying to make best of it by replacing the cast iron pipes, replacing roofs, trying to do what they can, but rendering this historic and handcuffing us to do renovations without added expense, or and do other things to the center. It would just be prohibitive to the owners. The owners are all opposed to it. The corporation that owns the common area is entirely, absolutely opposed to it. So there's not any good reason that we see to render this a designated historic landmark. Thank you.
Thank you.
If you have any questions?
I just have one comment on something you said earlier, because as an architect, I've done a lot of renovation work in historic buildings. And you were talking about the 8-foot wide glass, which certainly under any code couldn't be replicated today because of the windstorm codes.
Right.
So in any historic renovation, or even in another building, one would make modifications to the design. So instead of an 8-foot wide panel, you'd probably have 2 4-foot wide panels. And a lot of the renovations you described, the pipes and everything, that comes with the age of any building.
But if it's,
And obviously any old building that's 40, 50, 60 years old is going to run into those problems, just as the ones in Surfside did, which is going to cause us to have even more inspections.
yeah, so absolutely, Surfside's a prime example as to why a historic designation on this corner should not be given. Because these buildings are already crumbling, they're hazardous, and they have to constantly be maintained. And it's so costly considering their age. I think we're all gonna have a wake-up call on properties that are over 50 years old, of whether or not they even warrant maintaining those buildings as opposed to redeveloping them. Until we find other construction methods, other ways to replace the rebar in concrete, other ways to build buildings to last. But if these buildings are historic because of their design and architecture, and one major part of that design, at least on the elevation perspective, is the storefront design, and then you're saying, well, we can change that to meet current code, well, then doesn't that change the whole look of the plaza? And then therefore.
Well, I'm not saying change it, I'm
less-
saying it would be adapted to meet the historic guidelines. So, I mean, there are ways to do that, and other cities do that now.
So then the only thing left, if you remove the windows and then redesign the windows to meet current code, is crumbling masonry walls, cast iron pipes under the buildings for the plumbing that
But
are
again,
rotting.
any building of this age will have these same problems.
Well, there's 18 buildings in there and separate structures of different floor levels. This is not a plaza. The plaza is not run like a plaza. Every property owner has the ability to do whatever they want as far as it meets current zoning regulations. But as far as the property is not run like a plaza, there's no power of the corporation to force anyone to do anything. All we do is maintain the parking lot, which is, a major issue. Anyway, if you have any other questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Anyone else? Thank you, then. Is there anyone else wanting to speak?
Hi, my name's John Yohannan.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
I currently own 2 buildings in the Coral Ridge, Times Square area, or Coral Corner. But my family, I think I'm the oldest tenured owner in there. My family's owned 3 properties in there since I was 7 years old, which was 1977. So I think it wasn't Smitty's back then. It was the Coral Ridge grocery store, and it was owned by an Italian family. We bought the building next to them. But the renovations, what Robert's saying is true. There's been a lot of facade changes. And somebody on the board said, or the commission said that, they can be changed back. But I ask, at whose expense? And, is it fair to tax all the other owners, the 18 or 14 owners, to bring this thing back to the way it was? It's changed so much over the years. I've never seen, and the parking's horrible. I have an area in there that's a breezeway. I've had so many homeless people chase after the girls in my office. I had to put a gate up in between to stop the people from trying to chase my girls. Also to keep people from loitering in that breezeway, because they'll come in and they defecate, they urinate all over that place. And, some of the changes that I wanted to make, I can't make because there's not enough parking. And that place is depressed. It's always been depressed. And I don't think putting a historic designation will bring it back any better. So I just wanted to say that. Do you have any questions?
Thank you.
Who's swearing me?
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes. My name is Dr. Mitchell Grabois. I'm one of the more recent tenants. I can tell you the first thing I did was close up those historic windows. I put cement block all the way wrapped around. The amount of homeless, I'm a gynecologist, the office I have there is obstetrics and gynecology. The amount of homeless people is obscene there. We've called the police numerous times. I have cameras I've installed. You can watch homeless people having sex by the air conditioning unit, which is beyond me. If we could not make these changes, there's no way, politely put, I would ever even consider buying that property. I've spent over $500,000 just renovating for the gynecology office. And since then, I've had to rip up the floors again and replace the plumbing. Yes, it could happen in any area. But I know it took us about a year to get everything approved. Everything to get approved through the city is a frigging nightmare. 3, 4, 5, 6 months, stuff that's hazardous. And now you're going to throw this on top of it? That to me does, again, I live in Miami-Dade. I practice here in Broward. There's no way I would have considered getting this building. I'm constantly changing stuff, constantly getting permits, constantly paying legal fees, constantly months and months calling to get things done. This to me is, I just don't understand it. Plus my building is a square block. It's nothing, nothing exciting or unique about it. I don't know who the architect is. I'm not an architect student. I just know that I could not wait to close up the walls, change things as much as I could, and I plan on continue doing that. And I think, and I know the city's going to let me because most of the things we're changing is for safety reasons. Safety of the people, safety of, it just doesn't, to me, this is one more layer of torture as an owner. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you.
My name
Do you-
is Steve Bodkin.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do. I've owned my building in that shopping center. It fronts on Federal Highway just to the south of the corner building. And I've owned there for 30 years. Never once in my life did I think it was a historic monument of any type. It was pretty dilapidated. I totally had to renovate, tear the facade off the front of my building because it was falling. And just do not feel in any way, I kind of feel like we're being taken advantage of, that it's a group of people telling us what we can do with our property or we can't do. And I just feel like that's a difficult issue. So that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience? If that's it, Tricia, this was just a discussion, really.
Yes, that's a discussion for the board.
Pardon?
Yes, the board requested that this be placed on the agenda as a discussion item, and you invited the property owners here to
Okay.
provide comment and for the board to discuss further.
Okay. Do any board members have something? Go ahead, David.
Can you clarify if any of the 18 owners supported this measure at all? Or is it unanimously rejected by all 18 owners?
You have to talk in the mic to get it on the record.
Not aware of any owners that support. So there was a board of directors meeting for the corporation, no support there. So if they are, they haven't spoken up yet.
Understood, thank you.
Okay. Dave?
Well, historic beauty is in the eye of the beholder. I'd like to thank everybody for being here. This is a very kind of a groundbreaking meeting tonight because we had a chance to discuss things in a very cordial and respectful way. And I thank you all for, Stephen, thank you, especially because you've been here and now you're on the other seat. And a nice exchange of why historic preservation is important from the board's view and why at times it is, by some people's definition, impossible or impractical or inappropriate. This is what we're trying to come to terms with. I don't know how far the board wants to go tonight, but I went over to that location and I've driven by it so many times. So I just have a couple questions. And Tricia, looking at the building that has been turned into a glass, more of a current look, the one that Steve put up there. And to your comment, Arthur, when you said things could be taken back, are you saying that that building at some point in time, if it needed to be modified would have to almost reinvent itself to go to a more historical design if they changed it?
All I meant by that was that if in the future, for any reason, another owner wanted to reapply the historic look to the building, you could easily make a polymer mold of
Okay.
some of those bricks and
Yeah.
re-put it up. It wouldn't be the same
But it would be
thing.
artificial, it would not be original.
Well, you could probably do it out of brick too, but
Right.
I don't want to go that far.
So, given all that, my general feeling on this matter is that for the board, this is our first application as a board to designate a property this size. Is that correct?
But
Trish,
check
do you
with
know?
Sarah.
Was it ever done before you even got here, or was it done since you've been here?
Well, not as a district. The districts that we have are from earlier in time, from the 70s, 80s, and 90s. So those were way before my time.
And also, a few years ago, we did have a very big discussion on the
Okay.
North Shore District along the beach.
Okay.
Well, we did have
I was just
this-
curious how many times we've done it before, because, for me, I just think that the historic characteristic, if there is one, has been diminished over time. I stood in that parking lot, I walked around it and walked around it, I took pictures of it, and I tried my very best to get the wow factor, to get the notable value. And perhaps I'm missing it because I'm not that far into the architectural background that you happen to be in. But for the good of the people, I cannot see this historic value outweighing the value of the ownership's ability and right to prosper and grow with the intentions that they purchased their property for and what I believe to be their rights to do so. We may have chosen a property here that is a bit more to bite off than we can chew. That's just my personal opinion. With 18 ownerships and the questionable amount of change, I'm asking us to take another look at it and say, does this property truly have the historic designation value that are we trying to make it that way, or is it truly that way? And that's exactly where I'm at with this. And I really would invite everyone else to be completely honest about how they feel about it today, so that if we're going to move forward with this and take up the staff's time with this, it's going to be a big wheelbarrow to push. And if we're not, because we've listened to these people and we've listened to the attorneys and know that this may be quite a fight, we might want to choose a debate that we have a better shot of winning. That's it.
Tim, I couldn't, I would agree
One
with
lady
you.
here has her hand up.
Sorry about that. Oh, Barbara.
Well, we recognized from the beginning, when this was proposed, that the problem would lie in the fact that this property is owned by so many different entities, and that changes had taken place, and so forth. And I think it's really important that we opened the table for discussion and heard from people who actually live the experience. And I think we really need to reconsider.
Consider it both sides, you're saying.
I said, I think we need to reconsider any desire to make this an historic district.
Understood.
It's too complicated. It puts us in a position of litigation and liability. And I think in another instance, in another place, in another section of town that's equally, derivative of mid-century modern, it might be a different story. But with the kind of response that we've received today, we have to respect this, I believe. And we have respected this from many, many many perspectives.
Right.
From people who have wanted to make changes to their properties in historic districts, having done one today. So I feel that the reverse is appropriate here, and then we need to back off.
Thank you. David?
Trish, has any, if any other properties in this that have been on that list, have any of the other ones any contact with you?
The only other property that, well, so what happened initially was that Arthur brought a list of 12 buildings. Is that what you're referring to? The list? When you're referring to the list, David?
I don't know if I'm understanding you.
You're asking about
The
list
in
of
this
properties?
area,
Speak into
there's
the
other
mic, David. Speak into the mic. Speak into the mic.
In this area, there, this whole area had other designated properties and so forth. Although we're concentrated on this one here initially, have any of the others that were in that listing along the federal highway contacted you, heard through the grapevine or anything?
No. So part of the initial conversation was that Arthur brought forth 12 different buildings within the immediate area. And then the board asked for 3 of those buildings to be placed on an agenda.
Okay.
Of those 3, one the board did not move forward with. That was the Bayview building. And then the Castro Convertibles building, the board voted to move forward with a designation application for that. So that's underway in preparation to come back to the board for consideration. And then there is this property, which is the Times Square
Okay, I just wanted to
Plaza.
understand the whole process so that
Yeah.
we.
So the other 9 or so buildings that Arthur had mentioned previously, we haven't placed on an agenda to talk about individually. So I haven't communicated with those property owners.
Thank you.
Rich, do you have?
Yeah, I feel okay in this setting to jump all over the place a little bit because it's not a per se agenda item. So
Correct.
forgive me in advance if the thoughts are scattered. But I think initially I was the first board member to adamantly suggest that we get the owners here.
Right.
Right. And I thought that because I think it's crucial to understand the perspective of the ownership. And this is a really unique piece of property where you have 18 different parcels, or 18 or so. And if the collective position of those owners is absolutely not, we will literally fight this to every degree possible. We'll do everything in our power not to be in any way in favor of this. Then I think we really have to take Barbara's point here. You have to weigh what we're really doing and who we're accomplishing it for and who we're trying to put forth as to whose best interest is this really in. And I personally don't gauge the building to be something worthy of that fight, if that makes sense in this case. I personally never had that thought, that it was worth taking it on, and having heard further and further points cited regarding not just the modifications and renovations and things that have been done, but even initially before that. And mainly it's the taking component of that that's bothering me the most. If they're struggling with tenancy, I think the last thing we want to do as a board is present yet another layer of complexity to that tenancy and it hitting a market rate. And I know that's outside the scope of this board, but at the end of the day, there's a component of practicality here. And I think that's not weighted fairly in some cases, but being an open discussion, I feel fine to say that. If we want to get to an historical preservation lens, the modifications and the great adjustments to these buildings that have been made, coupled with the fact of the difficulty that would be associated with getting it to a place where it would be deemed historically rent, as I was looking at the Department of Interior standards, to get it to that stage, to go backward with it or to try to improve it, it just seems so impractical. And I've heard enough here to want to yield back and really not push forward on this, on really any initiative. And I can appreciate, Arthur, so much of what you put into the work here to present this to us, because you did a phenomenal job in presenting it. But to me, it was crucially important to hear from the ownership, and we've heard from them. And I personally take the position of wanting to listen to them in this case.
Okay, thank you. Well, I would tend to agree with everyone. I mean, I respect the will of the board, and I think we've heard what the will of the board is here. I will say one thing, though, that 30 years ago, if you had walked around South Beach with me, you would have taken a look at these buildings and going, what is the big deal? And 30 years later, it's a whole different story. So time and education does do something. And I think maybe, I would hope at one point, these two forces will collide so that historic preservation could be your ally rather than seen as an enemy. But I think that will take time. And I said, a lot of education on the part of the city. So with that, we will just end our discussion here and move on to the next subject. And the next subject, which is something I was going to bring up, was another building just to consider for historic preservation, which would be the Federal Courthouse.
Just to clarify, Arthur,
Yes.
for the record, the board does not wish to move forward with this property on a
Yes,
future
that is
agenda.
correct.
Do we need to have a motion made and a vote on that, Sherry?
No, because this was just a discussion. It wasn't really an item on our
It wasn't
regular
any-
item list.
So for the record, Trish asked the chair that this
Yes.
is no longer an item that we're going to be
And I
moving
could-
forward. Just so these people who came here tonight can go home tonight and know that
Okay.
this is not something they're going to get another letter in the mail and say, oops, we changed our mind.
And also, I
You
think
could change your mind in the future, but for now, I could ask on the record, is it the consensus of the board that you do not wish to move forward with this item at this point in time?
Thank you.
Yes?
yes,
Okay.
it's unanimous.
Thank you. And Tricia, you were saying something?
I'm sorry.
Were you saying something?
No, but just another point, just to go off of what you were saying, Arthur, as far as education is concerned, we have conducted multiple architectural resource surveys. They are available on our website. They contain a lot of information about neighborhoods, and it is the intent to do it citywide. So that is a good source of information as far as what is initially found to be significant as part of a district or a potential landmark within the city. So that's the initial review of large areas within the city. We have not conducted that along Federal Highway as of yet.
Right. A quick question. Oh, I'm sorry. A quick question. When I have looked at some of these historic reports, and they're really very highly detailed and they're really well done. My question is.
Excuse me, do you mind at the back to keep it down? Thank you.
I forgot my question already. I'm sorry.
The architectural resource survey report.
When you do that, do you recommend specific examples as more representative or a better architectural example?
So within the architectural resource surveys that we've conducted so far, we've identified potential historic districts and outlined those and delineated which properties within those potential districts would be considered contributing and non-contributing. And we've identified individual properties as potential historic landmarks within those neighborhoods as well. So far, on our website, we have 9 neighborhoods that have architectural resource surveys, I believe, 8 or 9. We also have the Sailboat Bend Historic District, of course, and then we have Central Beach, which is not posted on the website as of right now.
Part of my push to get some of these mid-century modern buildings taken a look at, as we've just discussed today, and some of the other times we've been here, was because I found that in all these lists, Tricia, there's really very, very little that pertains to the mid-century era. So I'm just wondering where on your timetable, so to speak, would you be coming up with?
So the most recent survey that we conducted was of Poinciana Park and Croissant Park. And those neighborhoods actually have quite a few mid-century type architecture a little bit later. But in writing the grants to obtain funding to conduct these surveys, we are focused on looking at where the highest concentration of properties are located that are the oldest within the city. So we're prioritizing the surveys in that way so that we ensure that we are conducting surveys in locations that are more likely to have clusters of buildings that could potentially be historic districts or contain properties that could be found to be historically significant today. But as we move forward, like I said, the intent is to do it citywide.
Okay.
And then, of course, Central Beach was conducted about 4 years ago and contains quite a bit of mid-century modern-esque type
And
architecture.
we did have a discussion with the owners then.
Yes.
Okay. With that, just one more item for consideration. There's been a lot of talk in the last several years about the Federal Courthouse on Broward Boulevard, which is a mid-century modern masterpiece done in the 60s. And currently, it will be for sale at some point, obviously by the federal government, once they build the new federal courthouse nearby. So in talking to our city attorney, I realized that since this is a federal building, we, as a city, as Shari was saying, really have no say as to what the federal government can do with it. And Shari will weigh in on this a little bit. But my intent in bringing this up is that this is a local architectural monument in the city of Fort Lauderdale. And even though we may not be able to tell the federal government what to do, we pass this on, obviously, to the city commission. The city commission can at least give its say as to how it feels about the building, no matter what should happen to it in the future, even if it's not binding. Shari, did you want to say a few words?
Sure. I'll just make a brief statement. In accordance with 40 U.S.C. Section 3312, the federal government is not required to comply with the city's zoning requirements. Specifically, 40 U.S.C. 3312C states that the federal government must give consideration to all requirements of the laws of the state or political subdivision of the state before each building is constructed or altered. Additionally, state and local governments may make recommendations to the federal government regarding the construction and alteration of buildings, and the federal government is required to give due consideration to the recommendation. However, it states in subsection F that an action may not be brought against the federal government, nor may a fine or penalty be imposed against the federal government for failure to consider the zoning laws of the local government. And so the issue here is that the point of designating a property is to preserve that property. And so when folks make changes to that property that are not authorized by this board or staff, what happens is there's a code violation given. And so in this instance, we can't put a lien or give a code violation to federal property. So essentially, the only way that it would be preserved is if the federal government voluntarily does that. But regardless of what we do, we can't force them. So that's the law.
We may be surprised.
Well, I think that's a much less complicated issue, and that's one building. I always thought that the shopping center was hugely complicated because of the individual ownership of so many different units.
I think we all came to that.
Yeah, and that once we heard from the owners, we would get clarity on that. But I think approaching one building and making a strong case for its architectural integrity of a certain period, the federal government might listen to that and respect it.
I agree.
Mr. Chair, is your intent then to make an application for our city commissioners to consider in the mindset that they would have a discussion with the federal government to say, we would like to designate this building? Would you be in agreement and then go forward from there?
Well, let's have Tricia.
How would
What
that
exactly
work,
is
Trish?
the
Because
work
I don't think City of Fort Lauderdale wants to get in a fight with the federal government and then start playing politics.
Tim, it's not
I don't think it
look
would be a
at it as
fight.
fight. I look on it as, we're showing, we
Yeah.
want to show this asset from the city, and we want to make sure the government knows that this is
And,
a.
you know, truthfully, this is the same kind of scenario we have with almost anybody. Does the federal government want their building to be historic preservation? Because if they don't, and we take the position that they should, then, and they say, well, we're bigger guns than you are, we're selling it.
No, I think
then
you can
what?
agree to disagree. And that is, we can recommend, and if the recommendation, we have no authority. We could recommend.
Yeah, I
and
like
if-
the idea
no,
of recommending
could I
it.
finish?
I was just trying to
Could I
find out
finish?
how we were going to
Could I
get to
finish?
his goal is to make it
Could I
historic.
finish? Could I finish?
I'm sorry.
And we would recommend it be considered historical. And if the federal government decides not to do it, that's the end. We're not going to
Okay.
fight it.
That was,
It's not a
actually,
fight.
I
It's
apologize
simply an approach.
for interrupting you.
It's all right. It's an approach. Women get interrupted a lot. I'll put it that way. But I insist on not being interrupted. So that probably puts me in a negative perspective for most of you, but I insist on it.
Okay.
Anyway, the bottom line is we do what we feel is appropriate. If the federal government doesn't want to do that, we have no authority. And we say, fine.
So we take a shot.
Yeah, I think it's
Okay.
worth it.
No, that explains that answers my question. Thank you.
So, Tricia, how would this process work? Would it work like another project in terms of your department would have to do a historic designation report?
Well, we would go forward with, if you would like it to be designated,
Right.
then we can do what the ordinance says that you can do, which is you can actually have a motion and say that you'd like the staff to initiate a designation application.
Okay.
The only thing that you may want to think about is the fact that you gave the other owners an opportunity to appear and talk about this with you today. No one has noticed the federal government. I don't even know who you would even notice. But that's something to also consider.
Well, it would be a motion to place this as an item on the next agenda. And as part of that, we could send a notice like we did the last time.
Inviting.
But I'm saying who at the federal government? Do you
It
have
would
a
be
contact?
be the GSA.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, they'd be the property managers for that property. Tim?
Would it be, would our path be better taken if we just made our communication to the commission and the mayor and the commissioners to say, we would like to suggest this happen, what do you think? So the commission could make their decision. I mean, they're going to have the
Tim, it's
application.
not formally in their hands yet, and it wouldn't be until Tricia completed the report.
Well, that's what I'm trying to get at. If Tricia goes through all that work, it goes before them anyway. They're going to either approve or deny it.
Couldn't we, as we were just alluding to earlier, as we did tonight with the people from Times Square, for the
I'm all
next
for it, but
meeting, for the next meeting, invite a representative from GSA to see.
Would
what
they be a
their-
rep from the federal government?
Again, like I said, I advise against this. I'm making that clear that we do not have authority to do this. But if you would like to, then, she can invite who she believes is the contact, a GSA or whoever for the federal government, and they could come to the next meeting and then discuss this matter with you. That's all I can say.
And why are you advising against it?
Because legally, we don't have authority. The
Right.
supremacy clause governs what you do with federal property. So in other words, like I said, if you designate or even if you designate it and they acquiesce to it at this point, and at some point there's a code violation, we can't put a lien on that property or give them a code violation. In other words, there's nothing that we can do. So even if they consented to the designation, still, if somebody made any changes to that property in the future, we have no say in the changes that they make. We can't give them a code violation.
And I
That's what
think
I'm
the
saying.
board understands that this would be a whole different situation, but
Well, essentially what I'm saying is that while there may be a representative that comes in here at the next meeting and speaks with you about it and may consent to it I don't know that that person necessarily has authority to promise that, hey, we're never going to make changes without your authority to the property. That's what I'm saying.
So
I don't know that that person has that authority.
might this be better if we go through the process and we do the designation report, and it's kicked upstairs to the city commission, and they handle this kind of communications?
I don't think she does the designation report prior to it actually having a motion saying you want it designated. So you could go two different routes. You could give a communication to the city commission and put it in their hands and say, hey, do you want to do a motion to designate this property? Or you could make a motion, today or at the next meeting and say you'd like this property designated. But then it's in the process of designation. You haven't already spoken to the federal.
You just raised a very interesting point. I mean, and I'd just like to throw this out, about sending a letter communication to the city commission saying that we were talking about designating this property and asking them what their feelings are and what they would like to do with it. I don't quite know what we're asking.
You don't necessarily have to send a letter. It can be a communication to the
Just a
city commission, and then they can talk about it at a conference and decide what they'd like to do.
I think that might be the best way to do it.
You'd like to do that?
Rather than do any big amount of work before anything is said and done, they would be the ones to set the policy.
Arthur, can I just say a couple things?
Yeah, sorry. Couldn't tell you where the voice was coming from.
What I'm gathering from the city attorney is let's just say in the most ideal situation, the federal government comes in here and consents to it. There's no binding effect to that consent.
We know that.
Okay, so rather than, I think, ask staff and ask Tricia primarily to take on this task of writing up a report with really a non-binding effect of the consent, hypothetically, getting a consent. I just don't see the draw to going through the process and procedure of that, knowing that it's as if it's consented to, right, in theory, because it is, but at any point in time, it can be withdrawn, modified, altered, whatever.
Richard, that's why we were saying rather than go through this whole process.
Right.
Just send a communication to the.
But I'm saying even the communication itself, like just follow this one point. If even it works out, right, regardless of which channel it takes from here, and someone does come in here, I think they're just finishing, but they were doing some significant renovation to the building. I drive by it every day. They were doing something. Regardless, I don't see the reward here at the end, because the designation most likely will be very temporary at best, or it will remain. But I don't see where the designation weighs to be. It's a tough one, because the federal government just saying, yeah, we consent, but okay, we consent, and tomorrow we don't. What have we accomplished as a board, I guess, by doing it that way?
What we would accomplish, first of all, I think we need to put this in to the city commission's hands and to see how they feel and how far they would like to go with it. But it's also a matter of local civic pride and how much do we want to save a building like this? And that's really.
But it's impossible to save it. That's the thing.
Well, but we still need to get our vote on the record as to what we'd want to do with it, even if we know that it may not be permanently binding because of everything we've said.
But I
mean, we still have to say something.
Well, I disagree. I don't think we have to say anything. I think we can recognize it by virtue of a plaque or something we've done in the past where there's some recognition of its design. But going through the process as if there's a binding effect at the end, only for there not to be, I think is a lot of things that need to happen for maybe limited resources that we're expending in doing so that, in my opinion, do not make sense, because there is no binding effect. That's my feeling. That's my initial feeling. I could be persuaded. Totally hear you. I think it's a great building. I think it's an awesome building. But I just don't know what point there would be to going through the process as if there would be a binding effect, only for there not to be, ultimately.
Wow.
If it's recognition, then the plaque, I guess, is, or I'm sorry. Barbara, go ahead.
No, it's okay. It speaks to Arthur's issue about education and raising consciousness. And that is, the process would do that. And if it's worth it for that, from that perspective, then I think it means something. And I think if it is designated as an historical property and the federal government decides to change it, it's out of our hands. But by the same token, it's raised the consciousness of the whole community about the historical relevance and significance of the building, which might prevent anyone from changing anything about it.
It's a great point.
It's education.
I think that's
It's
very well said.
education. It's education.
It is education, something we need here.
And our efforts might be better placed in something that we know we wouldn't have that problem with. And maybe we should think about that too
I agree.
before we move ahead. But the issue is we're always in this conundrum of wanting to protect property and wanting to preserve historical property when the people who own it know that once it's designated that way, they can't change the exterior. And that puts a clamp on them. So this is always our conundrum. And, you know, maybe we should go for a building that is less problematic. But I do think raising the consciousness of the community about that building is important.
Absolutely. And right now, the renovations are that they're shoring up the property just to make sure it's structurally sound. I'm sorry.
Okay. So, with listening to everyone, and Barbara said it best, and Richard, you made great points. So between what you said and what she said and what we're trying to accomplish as a whole, can we agree that we just make a recommendation, we put this in the hands of our commissioners, and let them do their pre-meeting, what's it called, the conference agenda?
Right.
Let them discuss it at the conference agenda. If they want to go forward with it, then we go forward with it. And if all we get out of this is public awareness of what we do, how it works, and how important it is, then we've accomplished part of our goal, which I believe that tonight was one of the most forward-moving meetings, as uneventful as it was, that I've been at least since I've been part of this board, because we made some changes, not so much changes, we just listened, we got listened to. Those people who left here are going to say, you know, we went down there and we stated our case, and they actually listened to us. And Arthur, to your respect, and I'm not blowing smoke at you, I didn't expect you to change your position so
Well,
graciously. No,
respect
but I commend you for it, and I appreciate it, because it's going to make it easier for me to argue with you in the future. But I just appreciate it that you were able to look at it and say, you know what, we're going to take a step back from this. It's a bigger pizza than we need to make right now. And it's very important that we do move forward with things that we can get our hands on and make some changes. And Barbara, you made a great point. We will be in the chat room about this stuff, and it's going to be good. And that building should be preserved, or could be preserved. And let's see if we could get the federal government to at least consider saying, yeah, we're going to hold on to it. We're going to repurpose it and use it for A, B, C, or D, but we'll keep the facade out front because it is beautiful. And, you know, everybody wins. Who knows? Maybe they have grants and funding that they could do it and get off the hook with. Maybe it'll be something that they could actually say, boy, am I glad we never thought of making it historic. This is going to work in our favor. We don't know. So it's worth a try. But I think the best thing for us to do is give it to the commission and let them run with it. Tricia can try and convince them to do it.
And also, I wanted to follow up on something that Barbara said, and a number of you said, that just the fact that we're talking about this today provides an education to everybody, and that we're bringing it up for people's awareness. I think it's more and more important that we as a board do talk about these things and see where they lead. David.
I agree, particularly when you talk about education. When people think of mid-century modern, you know, they have an image, and it's certain things that they have seen put forth, and that's what they have here in their minds, and not realizing it could be broader. And what we do is to bring things to the front to consider the education component. As you said, Tim, that's what we have to do.
Yeah, we'll go further when we all, you know, I think understanding anything takes fear out of the equation.
So would someone like to, I guess, do we need a motion to send a letter to the city commission?
Motion for communication to the city commission. So this would go on the agenda in the conference meeting. So the commissioners
Right.
would discuss it.
So would anybody like to make a motion to
There
the,
has been a motion in the past for the same thing.
there have been?
It was 2.5 years ago to make that request to the city commission at a conference meeting.
So we can certainly do it again. There's precedent, okay.
Tricia, can I ask what was the fine? What did the city commission at that two and a half years ago? What did they determine? What was the outcome of that being presented?
There was no outcome.
Okay. So they received the motion from the HPB,
Yes.
but
that's
they
correct.
just took no action on it in any way?
Yeah, there was no action taken.
Interesting.
What was the subject? Do you remember?
It was
I
regarding
don't.
the federal courthouse that, the motion said, the communication was to the city commission that the Fort Lauderdale Federal Courthouse is architecturally significant, to recommend the city initiate the historic designation process for this building, and to ask for information on any plans that are in place.
Well, you
Why
know,
can't we just do that again?
I think we should send it again because it was a different commission back then, too.
But I mean, same wording, same ditto, and see where it
Exactly.
goes. Now, are we all in agreement that if the commission does not take action on this, then we move on?
I think we've all said that.
Okay.
So would somebody like to
Could
make,
we insert somehow in this request to the commission that we understand, to communicate to them that we understand the complexity of dealing with a federal building? In other words, we're not going into a fight with the federal government. In other words, we understand the implications and the issues. We'd like to move forward if we can. Is there some way of making it clear to them in this statement?
Well, what you just said, if you're making the motion, then that's what you would include in your motion, so.
Okay, can we do that?
Okay, so then we just need a second to the motion, and we probably want to ask the clerk to read the motion again.
Barbara, is that okay that you're making the
It's
motion?
fine with me, yeah.
Okay.
Should I
You
state
have
it?
the wording?
So I think we probably need a second, and then we should ask
We
the
have
clerk
a
to
sec-
read the
we
motion.
have a second. Seconded by
Second.
Tim.
Second my emotion.
So we would probably just want to make sure that the clerk has everything down correctly, so that she should read it then.
Thank you.
Could the clerk reread the motion?
We can't hear you. Do you need the mic here?
We can't hear you.
I have that Ms. Lyons wants to let
It's still, is it not on?
it's red now. That Ms. Lyons wants the commission to understand, that the board understands the complexity of dealing with the feds.
I think that's,
No, that's incomplete. So my understanding is that you wanted to copy the motion that was made in the past and
Correct.
add to that what Ms. Lyons said.
Correct.
So,
Is that right?
Tricia, could you read again what the motion was in the past so that the clerk can get it? So what they're doing is they're copying that previous motion and adding the wording that Ms. Lyons just said. So Tricia will read it.
Yes, I just forwarded the language to the clerk, but I will read it for the record. To communicate to the City Commission that the Fort Lauderdale Federal Courthouse is architecturally significant, to recommend the city initiate the historic designation process for this building, and to ask for information on any plans that are in place.
What do we mean by any plans that are in place?
That's what the communication was previously.
I don't quite understand what that's meaning.
Again, I would advise against that. I mean, you can't force the federal government to come in here and give you plans of what they're doing. I mean, really.
Well, then let's leave it at just the historic
So
designation.
you want to take
If
that,
that's
yeah, I
that
would,
portion out.
Maker of the motion.
yeah, I would remove that.
Take that portion out and then make the statement from Ms. Lyons.
That we understand the complexity of the situation and its intricacies, something like that.
Well, it should, I mean, the board needs to enunciate what they would like to say. We can't
Okay,
create something for you to pass on to the city commission. So
Read it
is
one
it
more time.
simply, are you trying to simply just say that we understand the complexities of the designation process in relation to the federal government?
absolutely, yes.
And that's it?
Yes, we understand the complexities in relationship to the position the federal government might take, but we would like to move forward in spite of that, despite that. In other words, I don't want them to think that we would be fighting with the federal government, but rather that we understand what we're up against. And if we do get it designated as an historical building, it will be an accomplishment. And it will educate the public as to the integrity and importance of that building.
The only question I would have here is, what if the federal government does not respond and it takes a different path from what tonight just had, in that the ownership did show up?
But at that time.
Okay.
Leave it to the commission and the city to.
We don't have a requirement within our code that.
No, I completely understand, and I think tonight was more of a showing of the insistence of the board and trying to get, at least a percentage of the ownership here, which we did, but duly noted, Tricia, I'm aware that we don't have the requirement that they be here. Just for me, as pushing something forth, as is the case here, it just seems equitable to have the party who's being designated appear. That's all.
To me, the most important thing today that happened was that no one spoke on behalf of making it a historical district.
Yes.
No owner came and advocated for it.
Sure.
And everyone was welcome to come. And I think that the group that was here represented the feeling of the whole.
Sure.
Or we would have the opposing position come forth. And I don't think we have to worry about what the federal government, what the commission decides on this. We're just proposing it to them. I don't think we can do the what if. I just think we just move step by step.
Good choice.
So we have a motion.
Could we have it read? Yeah.
Can we take a vote? All in favor?
Did you want to clarify what motion she has before it
Yes,
goes to the commission?
let us reread the motion.
Yeah.
So communicate to the city commission
Here,
that
you,
the federal
We
courthouse,
can't hear.
can you use this one?
to communicate to the city commission, the federal courthouse is architecturally significant, to recommend that the city initiate historic designation process for this building. Leave out the last part, but then add, the board understands the complexities regarding the position the federal government might take, but they want to move forward despite that.
Is that your motion, Barbara?
Yes.
Okay.
Does anyone think of anything that should be included in it? Okay.
No, I think keeping it simple is good.
Okay. Thank you.
So we have a motion on the floor. Can we just do a voice vote?
I think I just wanted to make sure who second, was it you, Tim, that you second the
Tim.
motion?
I did.
So all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? The motion carries unanimously. And if there's nothing else on the agenda,
Move to adjourn?
I believe last meeting you asked me to give you a summary of the Pier 66 agreement that was pertinent to historic preservation. So it's in Section 8 of the agreement. It says that Pier 66 was damaged by Hurricane Irma. The developer is working on restoring Pier 66 and will work with the city's professional staff to seek proper permits from the city to ensure that any work in no way jeopardizes the historic significance of the exterior of the Pier 66 tower. The developer will seek historic designation of the exterior envelope of the tower portion of the building only, as the current building at the base of the tower was added many years after the tower and is not historic earlier. And they will designate it five years within 5 years of the development agreement or after the receipt of the certificate of occupancy of the restored tower. And it states that no certificate of occupancy shall be given for construction of any new principal structure of the Pier 66 property until the certificate of occupancy of the Pier 66 renovation is obtained and the Pier 66 tower is designated historic. So there.
that's the update, okay. So at some point then, they're coming back to this board for historic designation.
They will be coming, yes, in accordance with the agreement. Unless the agreement is amended and gives them more time, but I didn't see any amendment in the system.
So time-wise, what are we looking at this point?
Let me see.
Do we have any idea?
Date of execution is. So the effective date of the agreement is August 31st, 2018. So we're in 2022 now. So we're going on we're at 4-year mark now. So the agreement can be amended and they could possibly get more time, just so you know, but I haven't seen any amendments go through.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Is there anything else? Then do we hear a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn, Your Honor.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by David. All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.